Chuck Koplinski here with CBS 58 talking to Dallas Jenkins, the director of Greatest Christmas Pageant Ever. How familiar were you with the book? When I told my wife that they were making this book into a movie, she's like, "Oh, we used to read that when I was a kid." We never did, so I must have been living under a rock. How familiar were you with the material?
Well, when I was a kid, I'd read it in public school, and then I'd seen the TV movie that had been done back in the early 80s. Didn't remember a whole lot about it. My wife brings the book home almost 20 years ago, and she says, "Let's read this to our kids." And so I'm reading it to my young kids at the time. And a few chapters in, I'm like, "Man, I don't remember this book being so funny and so good. This is legit good." I mean, I was really intrigued. And the storyline of these six herdman kids who are the worst kids in the world, and everyone hates them and is scared of them. They hijack the Christmas pageant. They play them. They're going to play the main parts, Mary and Joseph and the wise men and the angel of the Lord. And of course, the church and the town are like, this is the worst thing that could happen. They're going to ruin our sacred pageant. And because of their poverty, because of their outsider status, they actually understand the true story of Christmas better than anyone. I was weeping when I got to the last chapter. I'm crying so hard I can't see the words, and I'm ugly crying. My wife's like, "All right, give it to me. Let me read it." She reads it. She starts crying. We pass it back and forth to each other while the other's recording or recovering. And I close the book and I'm like, "How is this not a movie? I have to make this movie. I was born to make this movie." For over almost 20 years, I've been pursuing the rights, and it wasn't until The Chosen came along 5 years ago and hit big, and the rights holders who had it at different studios and different directors, all while I was praying that no one else would be able to make it. So I apologize to any filmmakers who wanted to do this, but they were dealing with my prayers against them. But the fact that I'm able to finally talk to you about this and say there's a movie called The Best Christmas Pageant Ever, it's in theaters right now, and I made it, is a dream come true for sure.
This is tricky material in that you can't play it to where it becomes too corny
Right.
that audiences don't buy into it. If you lay it on too heavy, then they check out. Can you tell me a little bit what it was like to achieve this middle ground there with the cast, especially you're working with kids and the
Yeah.
atmosphere on the set.
Well, the cast has a lot to do with that. So the number one thing is when I'm focused on making this movie is I don't actually have an agenda. Now, I love the story, and I love that this movie points to the true meaning of Christmas, and that people who've seen it so far are calling it a new Christmas classic, and that in the pantheon of Christmas movies, that this includes the actual, the story that Christmas is based on as well. So I like that, and as a believer, that's meaningful to me. But my primary job is to make sure it's entertaining, that it checks the boxes of a Christmas classic, that you are laughing, and that yes, you are emotional at the end. How do I achieve that? Well, the cast has is a huge factor in that. Pete Holmes and Judy Greer as the dad and mom, amazing comedic actors who also can pull off emotion. Lauren Graham from Gilmore Girls, who's the narrator and also has a big scene in the movie, is a miracle when it comes to that kind of dance between comedy and drama. So if the movie's witty enough that parents can enjoy it, got enough, set pieces that the kids can laugh and enjoy it, and it's just meaningful enough and moving enough that you've got tears coming down your face, but you don't feel like you're being preached to. That's the secret. That's the trick. And that's what, according to, the people who've seen it so far, feels like we've pulled that off. I think the fact that you've got a 91% on Rotten Tomatoes, even the New York Times likes it, for a family PG, Christmas film. I feel like that's putting you in the ballpark of that middle ground that you're talking about.
Can you speak a little bit about Beatrice Schneider, how you found her? She, to me, broke my heart the entire film. I mean, you
Absolutely.
look at her and she just seems to have, she seems older than she is. There's a maturity there, and she got me from the first second and just carried me throughout the film.
She's extraordinary. When we were auditioning, we're getting hundreds of hours of audition tape, and my wife is watching the first round because she's got really good instincts. She's like, "I just found a kid. Check this out." And Beatrice is someone who we had them audition for two roles. One, kind of the bully, funny, slapsticky kind of scene where they're tough and being mean to everybody, and then there's the tender, vulnerable scene, and which is very hard for a child actor to pull off. She nailed that, and struggled a little bit, to be honest, with the toughness of the other scene. But I'm telling the studio, I'm like, look, it's easy to direct a kid to be more obnoxious. To find a kid who can be vulnerable at the age of 12, 13, to have that kind of maturity, it's extraordinary. The big scene at the end when those are real tears. I mean, she is a true talent, and working with her was a joy, because she, at the end of the day, she's still a kid too. So she's having fun with her friends. To her, I want her to preserve that innocence. I don't want Hollywood to swallow her up. And so that was part of it too. But man, she was a revelation. And I'm so glad to see the critics and audiences go, who the heck is this kid? And where else can we see her? She's amazing.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see what she does next. Last question. Faith-based films have become very popular within the last 5-10 years. Why do you think that's happened?
Well, I think that they're just better, honestly. I'm not a fan of that term, because it has been so, it's become its own genre, and it feels somewhat exclusionary of normal people. You know, I mean, and by normal, I mean normal moviegoers who aren't necessarily going to a movie for an agenda or for a sermon. And I think that the faith-based films, and I think this film could be called that, in the sense that it definitely points to the true meaning of Christmas, but it doesn't feel like one, right? It doesn't feel like a sermon. It doesn't feel like an agenda-driven film. And I think that's what's caused a lot of these films to become more successful. Even The Chosen, which is about Jesus, a TV show that's primarily focused on the true story of Jesus. I hear from people all the time, 30-40% of our audience who's not believers, saying it feels like a good historical drama. And I think Best Christmas Pageant Ever, like many other faith films who have come in the last 5 to 10 years, feel like normal movies, even though they have a faith element to it. And I think the audience recognizes that pop culture should reflect life. And if 20 to 30% of the country attends church every year and prays, 20 to 30% of the films or TV shows should reflect that. So I think that's what's happening, is just the films are getting better and Hollywood's going, great. Finally, we have some decent filmmakers who can tell these stories, just like we have decent filmmakers who can tell their own stories of their own backgrounds. And I think that's been a key part of the last 5 years.
Dallas Jenkins, director of the Best Christmas Pageant Ever, currently in theaters. Need to check it out. Thank you for speaking to me today.
Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.